So, for today's episode, I thought about doing things very differently because, we've all been in there and done the whole avoidant attachments stuff. We've talked at length about that. And I mean, look, we may return to it eventually. But today and moving forward, I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk about new areas that are still in the realm of relationships. And what better thing to talk about than the struggles of modern dating and actually what those struggles actually look like? Because I think it's one thing to talk about one specific personality type that shows up, but really, there's so many things wrong with dating and also struggles that we face in dating. And today I'm also joined by my colleague and team member, Tawny Lovelace. Tawny, do you want to introduce yourself again for those who may not know you or would like a reintroduction?
Sure. I'm Tawny Lovelace. I am a motivational love coach, certified confidence coach. I help women create transformation and momentum, especially after a heartbreak.
On that note, I was going to say, why don't we start with, I think, one of the biggest issues with modern dating, which is, and I'm going to quote a client because I think you'll really relate to this. She said, I think people don't just realize how so many of us are traumatized off our dating experiences that we're all going into dating and sharing in a pool of collective trauma. And with heartbreak in particular, there are so many people who, frankly, haven't healed properly from a lot of their heartbreak and are just bashing against each other. And, I know this is one issue, but really impacting each other because they haven't moved on from a previous ex.
Yeah, and you know what? I also hate kind of like the social media because I feel like social media, we're kind of like everything's pinned against one another, right? We're either like saying women aren't doing this or men aren't doing that. It's making it seem like there's a lot of freaking rules to to follow so that we could be successful. And it doesn't have to be, I don't think it has to be that deep, you know? I've had people that have been in the middle of heartbreak and found their next season of love, and it's fantastic. So it's not necessarily like you have to be healed completely before you meet somebody and have that love life, but I do think you have to be aware of how it impacts your love life if you're not healed or if you're in the midst of healing. I think it's a level of awareness, don't you? Like they need to be aware, and a lot of people aren't aware.
I think a lot of people aren't aware at all. Like, I think that a lot of people, I think that they just go into this without any preconception of how their baggage could potentially impact another person as well, or themselves. And I think it's a form of self-sabotage. It's like, okay, you're going to go into dating with particularly like the bruises of a previous relationship where you're practically bleeding on the table with, a new partner. Why are they going to be, the doctor that helps heal you?
Well, yeah, and being a part-time bartender, I hear these stories all the time, right? It's like one person's dating, it's always one person in that couple that, well, I just spoke to someone who was just like, hey, I actually, they wanted to ask a few questions, and I asked them if they knew if she had any, trauma or any, bad heartbreaks or anything that she was, need to heal from. And they said, oh yeah, as soon as I met, she trauma dumped, and like she had all this trauma and all this different stuff. And I thought, I mean, that's a sign. I mean, why would you even continue to pursue at that point if you knew she had all those issues? But I mean, that's another thing, right? Like people just, it's laid right out in front of you sometimes, not always, but a lot of times it's laid out right in front of you and we just kind of bypass it.
On that
And then when
note,
you're going through the heartbreak,
it's so funny you mentioned the whole trauma dumping piece that, that person was talking about as well too, because that is a massive sign. Like to me, I think it's like one thing I think to, to share eloquently, some of the struggles you've gone through and how you dealt with it. But I mean, my God, some people, I don't think people realize just how like trauma dumping can really speed things up in terms of connection and intimacy in a way, well, especially the chemistry in a way where it's like that shit can also get you glued very quickly to someone, and it's not always a good sign. I know it's probably a feature in your book on 50 red flags, but I mean, it's not a good sign. Like if someone's feeling the need to just detail all the stuff they've gone through, not just with a previous relationship, but with family and their own history of trauma. I mean, on date one, it's like, what are we, a therapy session or is this a date?
yeah, I'm always surprised that people would sit there and listen to all of it, and not maybe try to like sideswipe it or try to, you know what I mean? Kind of change directions. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that, but people are staying, so it says a lot about the person listening too. I mean, do they not know how to like, that's like, do you not like an example? A lot of people struggle to say no. I mean, like the majority of people that I come in contact with have a hard time telling people no. And so it's like if you're sitting there listening to somebody on a first date and they are doing that, are you going to say, "Hey, look, Are you, if you're not comfortable to say no to certain things, you're probably not comfortable to even address that either because you're like, oh man, they're sharing all this stuff. So I get how it can be kind of a conflict, but I think it goes back to at this age and stage, and I'm not talking about like 20, maybe in your 20s is a lot different, but when you get to be much older, I think we just need to be more direct. I think a lot of times we're not honest with what we want. I'll bring us up something interesting. So I have a collective of friends or acquaintances and even some, not so many clients, but more friends that are saying right now they're looking for something casual, and everyone they're coming into contact with has like either the dating app will say no, they're looking for long term or something serious. And I think that comes down to people aren't owning what they really want. They're saying what we think we want to hear. And I feel like if people would just be honest and say, look, I'm looking for something casual, I'm coming out of this, I just want some attention, affection, whatever it is, I think we could navigate the dating thing a little bit more with more clarity and a little bit easier, don't you?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, and it's funny because even when you show up being clear with what you want, that freaks the wrong people out real quick
Oh
because
yeah.
they're not ready for that level of investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also think it's just like, and not everybody, listen, not everybody can even deliver that message, like you said, so that it's received well. Some people don't. I mean, yeah, I guess I can understand why it does make it so hard to have that clarity and be honest because not everybody's receiving it well. Not everybody's on the same page. Not everybody's healed enough to have that conversation. So they say one thing, but they really want another. So,
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, like there's so many layers of that. Like if we just stop at like this whole point on, being direct and also being upfront, I think like we could start with like, to start off with, I think we have so many shitty ideas as to what dating involves. Like the number of times I've got
mhm,
clients, particularly women who come to me saying, I'm learning to speak up for myself. And, if a guy does something which I don't like, I call it out and I say, listen, this doesn't feel right to me. Or, if we're going to go on a date, oh, great example. Person I'm working with, they were saying how this guy was like, hey, what if we just go and grab ice cream, randomly on like a Thursday night? And she was like, look, with all due respect, I'm looking for something with a bit more investment than that because to me, that's what I want. I'm not expecting a restaurant that's a five-star dinner, but I would like to maybe have at least a drink to properly like commune and get to know you, not something that feels a bit too casual. And, people were saying to her, you're being too much. You'd have way too high expectations. You're being a princess. And I said, no, I don't think you're being a princess at all. In fact, I think you're actually being very clear about what you want. And
mhm.
what she wanted was to have a proper interaction to, engage with this dude and find out where his head and his heart was at. And sure enough, he actually really didn't listen to her. He was like, oh, well, let me book you in for like a restaurant date. And she was like, that's not what I asked, but whatever. And that didn't go anywhere beyond that. But to me, I think that it's just what I found interesting about her story in that instance was how she was really practicing to just be very clear about and assertive about what she wanted. Yet people around her, girlfriends of hers were saying, you should let the guy choose. You're being too picky. Why are you like not letting this guy, give him a chance, like actually get to know him a bit better? I swear after a few patterns and a few cycles of things, you don't need to give people chances. And I certainly don't think she was being picky.
Yeah, and I think it just, I actually can see it from both sides, right? Because I can see like her intentions. On one hand, I'm saying embody that. If that's what your intentions are and you're looking for something and that's what you desire, then own it and stand to it. Nothing wrong with it. And on the flip side, I can also understand where it's like maybe her girlfriends were saying, well, look, I mean, you can still get to know somebody through this. Maybe it takes the pressure off of him. Maybe he doesn't want to have, men have issues with performing, right? Showing up and performing, for love. So it's like I can see both sides. That's why I think you just have to stay authentic to yourself. I think you have to go with what feels good to you. It's somebody else can discern whether he's worth their time, whether it's an ice cream date or a dinner date, or whether there's, maybe her thoughts were maybe the interaction wasn't going to be engaging enough since it's just a casual date, and she thought it might maybe formal would be better because then they can really get to know each other and engage in a conversation that might be more, a level of depth maybe she was desiring. But yeah, I think we got to stop listening to outside. I mean, it's great to hear outside perspectives and look through different lens, but I think you have to know yourself really well, which really comes back to that whole thing about dating. You've got to know yourself really well. When you know yourself really well, it's like half the battle.
And even when you know yourself really well, it can still be a challenge. Like
Oh, yeah.
I've had some really fascinating, stories recently where I've heard like some people say things to me like, oh, one part of me really likes this person I'm dating. Another person gets the ick because this person doesn't have enough polarity. Another part of me is like, they're really good, like they tick all the boxes, but I'm also not sure if I'm really into them. These are very,
Hmm.
if we're again putting the attachment stuff to one side, at times they can be very valid things to listen to, and it doesn't mean any of those things are wrong. Like, I mean, attraction is very much a necessity in romantic relationships, and also, safety and stability are also really important, but we can't be making a relationship out of just safety and stability.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think, like you said, I mean, it is knowing yourself is half the battle, but that doesn't end all the battles, right? I mean, there's a lot more to it. And that's why when a lot of times, sometimes I take calls, a lot of calls from people who reach out because they think they're dealing with an avoidant, but the question they're really asking or the clarity they really need has nothing to do with the attachment style. It really comes back to what is desired and what's deserving and that, within that relationship. It doesn't really have to do with their attachment style. It wouldn't matter what their attachment style was. If this person's treating you this way or not showing up fully, that's a block. That's an area that like is not your needs are being met. So what do we do from here? So I think people with social media, it's just so easy to get into the labels, right? And things get thrown around so easy. So it's one of those things where you got to have that level of discernment too, and kind of the understanding of what all of it means. Yeah.
And whilst I think labels do help, I think the problem too is that everything sort of just collapses into, well, they're avoidant. And it's like, well, not always. Like, in fact,
Mhm.
there are a lot of people out, like if you are seeing a lot of avoidance, I mean, that can be a statistical fact and also something to work on in
Mhm.
therapy. But, but I think it's more than just attachment stuff. Like, I mean, I've had
Oh
plenty
yeah.
of instances where I'm pretty sure the guys I was dating weren't that into me. And it's like, okay, but it is what it is. Just move on. Or, it was a case of, you know, there was just there was a real fit problem in terms of communication styles. Like, I mean, gosh, I'm sure there have been plenty of people who can relate to the fact that it's just like, this person was lovely, but
Hmm.
they just weren't at my level. They didn't have this, they didn't have that. And it's not necessarily about being picky. It's just like knowing yourself, knowing like, if I'm going to invest, I need certain things that are here. And if they're not here, I'm not going to wait for them to magically appear.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I do think labels help. I mean, I hate that labels get thrown around, but it does make it easier when you're trying to describe a situation or describe the traits of somebody and so forth. So we have those conversations, and it's interesting that you're like the avoidant and just not that into you because, and I know you've done a video and I have as well, but I was just dealing with a client who she was like, well, he's avoidant, and she was giving me all these things, and I'm like, that's not it's like that's not the determining factor that he's an avoidant. He may just be showing up that way with you, and it sounds like he is because he was saying how he only wanted, the physical. He already had a girl, like he was already dealing with somebody. And I'm like, that version of, of him might be over there. He might be emotionally available to her. He just wants the side hookup, and so he's not going to be, he is going to have avoidant traits with you and so forth. But again, that's where your discernment comes in and being able to kind of evaluate and just, again, is this something that I want? Whether it's an avoidant or not.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, look, maybe at some point in your life, people like that kind of thing. I personally don't. But,
Yeah.
you're right. And I think too, I feel like too many people get caught up on the whole, like, well, what are they doing? It's like, do you like what they're doing? Do you enjoy
Yeah.
this behavior? Like, there's billions of people out there. Why are we wasting so much bandwidth on just this one person? And I tell you what, I get it. A lot of people often have well, I haven't had, emotional connection, chemistry quite like this person, so I don't want to give
Hmm.
up straight away. In my experience, I don't know about you, 20, but you can find, I don't know, you've said this to me before too. You can find good chemistry at a lot of places. It's not that rare.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really not that rare. I've had multiple conversations this last week with people about it's honestly just boiling down to attraction over alignment, and then they're like, this isn't aligning. And it's like, I've been having a lot of conversations about how did attraction become more important than alignment? A lot of people place a lot, I mean, listen, I'm not saying attraction isn't important, but it's like that might be at the top of the list right now with like people around me. It's like the attraction thing is huge. The attraction and the chemistry, even though the person doesn't align. I'm like, how does attraction override integrity? How does the attraction and that chemistry override someone not being present, not meeting the needs of like the character of the person you're wanting to, engage with? And so it is interesting how strongly people place like that value on attraction when they're sitting here saying they want alignment, you know?
Oh, I completely agree. And I mean, even when they get the alignment, there may not be any attraction at all. And then in that case, you're like, well, where
Hmm.
to go? Do we go? Like, it's like the pendulum swung too hard in the other direction. And then they're like, well, do I go to the people who I was highly into but treated me terribly? It's like, no. I think that there is a middle ground, but that, as a mate of mine says, that percentage of people is incredibly small. Like, when we look at the
Hmm.
the reality, you want to find a partner who's secure and who actually is someone you want to build a relationship with, who's attractive as well. You're not going to find that person, overnight. It's probably going to be a smaller, portion of the population.
Yeah, yeah. And I think as you also just evolve or maybe mature or get older, all these different things, I think different traits become more attractive to you.
Oh, hell yeah.
When I was younger, yeah, you're looking for physical attraction is definitely at the top, and it's not something you want to lose over the years, but you find that when people can have emotionally aware or intelligent conversations, that becomes very attractive. And maybe they started at a 6 and now they're looking like an 8 because their conversation is really in depth and spiritual and has layers and there's substance. And I think that's something there's a lot to be said, but you don't find that opportunity if you're just on the dating apps. You don't find that opportunity if you're not having that personal contact a lot of times, you know? So,
I agree. And I mean, I think too that I think that over time you've got to kind of be open to be beyond just the dating apps as well too as well. Like I think that whilst they're an excellent tool, they're not the only way to meet people as well too.
mhm.
And I think that one thing I will say, I don't know about you, Tony, like one thing I will say is I found that the people that I'm really gravitating towards particularly are survivors of bad relationships because it's almost like we have a shared language and
Mhm.
and I think people who've come out of it and are in a healing to healed phase of this
Yeah.
get it. I think there is obviously the cluster of people who will continue to berate and be like, ah, my ex this, my ex that, I get it. But I feel like those that are sort of moving beyond the my ex was evil to, look, it was a tough experience that I went through and I didn't deserve what I went through. And I also can see my involvement in this dynamic as well too. And I'm
Mhm.
differently and I'm moving differently. I think that sort of person, and I've experienced this with people in my circle, is you just have a different way of navigating relationships because you both have an understanding of certainly what you're not looking for. But I also think, too, with bad relationships, you actually learn to be more of yourself because you realize, oh, well, if I don't shrink myself, I'm not going to be in a position where I'm with another idiot like that other person that I was with. And I think people generally, as they come out of these toxic, nightmarish dating experiences, start to realize, well, if I'm more myself and I show up as me and I stop, conforming, twisting myself to be just a good person, then I'm actually probably going to find people who are at a very similar wavelength to myself.
Yeah, I think I mean, there's so many different keys to the successful dating out here, but I think you have to show up as yourself. I think that means getting comfortable and confident with speaking your mind, what you want. I mean, most of those toxic relationships, people dim themselves. We swipe things underneath the rug. We don't address things that need to be said. We don't show up fully as ourselves because, we don't want to lose that person. We fear being single. There's just so many things that come into it. But I think if you can get to the point and come out of something like that and really own who you are and I do find that is the experience, especially with my clients. They've come out of something and now they're like, I'm not doing this again, and so they are getting more comfortable asking the questions. Um, I think it's just key to lean into that, and then things will, different opportunities will come about.
Yes, completely agree.
Yeah.
And and I know that a lot of people struggle with that because I think that there can be a lot of self-trust issues off the back of a bad experience because they think, oh,
Hmm.
well, how will I know if a person's going to treat me badly again? Will they be showing up as someone who's avoidant, a narcissist, whatever it may be. Look, honestly, I will tell you, I think it's going to sound strange. I feel like dating got better for me post avoidance stuff because I could see
Yeah.
things more clearly and I didn't
Yeah.
waste time nearly as much as I used to.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think most of the clients I've worked with that are coming out of these experiences feel the same way. I think in the beginning, the people who haven't leaned into, okay, I need to get through this. This is what it was. This is where I'm at. This is where I want to be. I think those are the ones that kind of have the fear about like, I'm scared I'll never be able to, tell moving forward. I also find those are the ones that are kind of more stagnant in their growth. They really don't lean into like, not that they necessarily have to do coaching, but they're not really leaning into that growth. They're more concerned about, maybe the next relationship or dating and all these different things, and people who really lean into like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to learn more about myself or learn how to become more assertive or to release this person or to get over this person. I find people who lean into the actual work are very confident moving forward. I mean, I feel like that's when they express it to me, they're like, oh, I'd never do that again. I can definitely spot it now. So it's something to think about because if you just brush it off to the side like a bad experience, you may very well attract it again or recreate it.
Very true. Often I find, it's funny, like I've had some people say to me things like, oh, um, I just think if I remove myself from this, I'll never experience this again. It's like, well, if you don't learn from it, you'll just recreate it with someone new because it's very
Yeah.
easy to do that. But if you really absorb all that you needed to off the back of this bad experience, no, you won't. If you do find yourself, you'll extract yourself out of it much more quickly and you'll
Yeah.
spot it. And of course, there's all the trauma elements in that too, which we don't need to go into for this conversation. But I think that if you really heal from it, one of the gifts that come out of it, I think, is this increased sense of boundaries, discernment. I'm not putting up with BS anymore as well, too. Also, a lot of the conventional dating wisdom just starts to fall by the wayside where it's dumb. Like, I mean,
Hmm.
there's so many dating tricks, tips and tricks from people out there where you're just like, what is like all this stuff talking about? Like, I think one thing I've had to learn is just trust myself with a lot of dating stuff
Yeah.
and not necessarily rely on everyone to chime in with like the best advice. I will say, particularly for men, I think I don't want to use the word vulnerable, but I think men who I think probably feel emotionally castrated are, I think, at risk of listening to the wrong influences, particularly those that try and, show like, look at me, like straight men in particular, like, look at me with like this gorgeous woman who I got with these
Hmm.
very shady pickup artist techniques. I mean, I'm like,
Hmm.
that is not going to help you in having the kind of relationship you want.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's like you said, it's teaching a lot of tips and tricks that do work for the outcome that works in that scenario, right? Maybe the trophy girl and short-lived fun, but if those are typically also men who really want something long term, I find, and they want something of depth, and they're not getting it because they're learning all these pickup tricks and tips and so forth. But yeah, I think you nailed it when you said self-trust. You've got to be able to self-lead. You've got to be able to have that. So many people don't trust their intuition. They look to other people and all the different, information on social media. But, those tips and tricks, I mean, don't get me wrong. When I first became a coach and I was doing dating, different things, I would share those little dating tips that would help. And honestly, none of that really matters because if you know yourself, you need to know, like, again, you need to know yourself. You need to be able to lead yourself and trust your decisions and trust your wisdom and your experiences and what works for you. It's kind of like with people doing the whole chat GPT. Like, listen, I love chat GPT, but I have a lot of clients that are like, well, I was on chat GPT and it said this. And I'm like, but did you tell them this about you? Oh, no, I didn't. Well, then the information you're getting may not apply to you. Sounds good. Sounds smart, but maybe go back in and go, be critical. Tell me about myself. Or, you know what I mean? Say something so it'll give you the raw truth because it's not always giving you the raw truth.
Or able to understand what you're picking up in real time. If you're
Hmm.
like, you do not need to wait for GPT to validate you to say this situation is effed. Like, if you can see some certain patterns emerging, which lead to
Hmm.
potential complications, what GPT, in my experience, is also very cautious at the moment. I mean, as of today, because it gets a lot of algorithm
Yeah.
changes,
Yeah.
as of today, it tends to try and lean back from being urgent, whereas Gemini is the opposite. I feel like it's very urgent in terms of like what's going on. And I think the
Hmm.
middle ground is what are you picking up in this moment and how's it affecting you? Like the other day, I was chatting with a client and she was saying, well, I connected with a guy, and the things that I were picking up in that were that, he would, when I was telling him briefly about my dynamic with my family, how I've got an estranged family member, he was saying, well, you should get in contact with them because you'll never know if you'll ever have the opportunity to contact them again. And he also disclosed separately that he uses weed gummies to manage his anxiety. She said to me, this doesn't feel good. Like, I know it's not like glaring red flags, but some of these things just don't sit well with me. And then, further things popped up. And even though she was inputting this into GPT and it was saying, don't worry, give it more time, it'll be fine, which in theory, I think makes sense. I'm not discounting GPT's ideas, but she
Yeah.
quickly gotten to a point where she was like, but I know, like, something inside of me knows this experience. Like, I've actually been here before.
Yeah.
I don't need to see it till I get the third or fourth sign. I can choose now to be like, it didn't feel good at the start. Why would I continue this moving forward?
Yeah. Yeah, I think ChatGPT is good for information, something if you're trying to gather a pattern or like any of that. But as far as it helping you make a decision, I think that's when, again, you have to be back on to trusting yourself, how you think, because it doesn't take into account all those experiences and different things, on either side. And not everybody's great at articulating what they're trying to say. So you may not even be articulating what you want when it comes back. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think you just have to do a little bit of work and knowing yourself so that you can. I think the most important thing is, do you trust yourself? Do you trust your decisions? Do you trust your wisdom and your experiences? Do you feel confident in the decisions you make? If you're still leaning into ChatGPT, leaning into other people's opinions, and you're not just going with what feels good to you, then I think there's a little bit of work to be done, because you want to be able to make those decisions without, relying on other things and people.
I will be honest and say this, not about you. I hate friends and dating. Like, I mean, I think some of them who've been through stuff,
Yeah.
and learned from it can be
Yeah.
fantastic and fabulous. And it's not to say that all of them are bad. I shouldn't make it out like all friends are terrible. But my God, some of them can be god awful.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, yeah, my circle, listen, I think we've all been through enough in my circle. We're on point. I love it. I was just sharing something with one of my girlfriends and she's like, I think you should do whatever feels great to you. And I was like, that's my girl. Um,
Good advice.
but I remember the days of us when we were younger and we were very opinionated and it was based off of our own experiences and how we felt. If we thought she was dating someone that was beneath her, we would definitely make it be like, well, you shouldn't be dating, and make her feel bad almost for dating the guy. So I think it's not always helpful. I mean, they try to be helpful, but I think that's why, again, you got to trust yourself before you trust anybody else.
Completely agree. And I can understand, obviously, why people turn to a lot of authority people on the internet, like a lot of the key people for dating, because they're looking for guidance. And look, I think it's a phase. I think, I'm sure you probably feel the same way. You know, when you've been out there enough times and you've made a lot of moves, you just get better at picking up on a lot of this stuff and just moving forward. And you just don't spend so much time in your head worrying, like, was this person into me? What's going on? You're just like, is this working for me right
Yes.
now? Yes, no.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. One of my longtime friends inboxed the other day and was like, Your cutoff game is strong." And I was like, it's years of experience. It's not like I'm just cutting people off. It's just when your heart is at risk of that's what's at risk, right? And at this age and stage, I'm too old for games and playing and stuff like that. So it's not really like you're cutting them off, but I'm not entertaining things that don't align. That's just what it is. I don't have time. You run out of it's interesting because I kind of feel like a lot of people are at their cutoff stage or feel like they're good at cutting people off, don't you? Like I feel like I'm running into a group. I was just having a conversation with someone the other day, and it was like the group of women that are out here now have been through some bad experiences. They're, good women, independent, did their thing, but they're at the age now where they're like, I don't really care to date at all. And so they were just sharing, they find it kind of like challenging and complicated to be dating out here because so many women are okay with being by themselves and any sign of challenge or something that doesn't align, they're cutting them off quick. So, um, do you think that's an experience you're having? Like, do you see that happening?
I mean, I can speak for it for myself. Like I could say, I mean, I see that with men and women, across sexualities, where I think that a lot of people are just getting burnt out with dating, or taking
Yeah.
people away from it, where they're just like, no, screw this, I'm not enjoying this. And it could be for reasons like dating is toxic, it's full of crap, the dating apps, have numerous issues and I don't like them. Like, I mean, I think there's a lot of what I call valid points. Like, I mean, if we take, for
Yeah.
example, dating apps, I get it. Like, for a lot of men, there is this argument that a woman can cycle through, you know, X number of profiles before she picks the one that she wants to go out with. And the men, they may feel like they don't ever get picked, which I understand that is an argument and a
Yeah.
stereotype, and it's a thought that's been running out there. To whether it's valid or not is neither here nor there. I'm not here to validate it. But it's one of those things where, for some people, they feel like the way it's structured by dating apps in particular isn't helping them. But at the same time, I also hear plenty of people say, well, it's also catering the wrong kind of people because we're focusing on looks first rather than the stuff that actually matters. So
Yeah.
our eyes are doing the searching, not our wisdom of going, hang on a minute, is this person actually good for me? Is this like where, I think there is indeed stuff that's setting us up for failure with this current systems we have. But putting that to one side, returning to what you asked me, are people walking away from dating? Absolutely. I think a lot of people are fed up with dating, bored, burnt out, just not enjoying it because it's not fun. I mean, I still enjoy meeting new people online. I find it,
Hmm.
I find that part fascinating. But I think that, the issue that is there for a lot of people is, being single is at the moment more pleasurable than being with a romantic partner because you don't have to put up with the potential BS.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. I honestly, I hate that so many people are like, no more dating, and they kind of don't want to date, and they kind of are like, I find some are kind of even like man hating and so forth. And even men who are like, oh, women just want that. I'm like, it's so, I obviously I'm in the bar at that time, listening to all the different feedbacks and different perspectives, but it's like, it's so discouraging. So I'm like, no, like there's still, there's still hope and there's good love out there and there's good people. I mean, there's a ton of people that want the same thing, but I do think a lot of those people haven't been empowered through their dating era, and now they're really empowered as being like more confident, more comfortable saying what they want, assertive, embodying all of that. And now it really brings a whole new level to being single. So I can see where that could be like kind of exciting to be out here, and it's a powerful space to be where it doesn't really matter if you're meeting somebody, and you're okay if you do and you're okay if you don't, right? But I hope people like still keep that door open, because I think it's exciting for people.
Well, there's so many things to say to that. So, firstly, with regards to the people who are like, hating on, like, for example, women hating on men or lesbian women hating on lesbian women and vice versa for men, with who they're attracted to, I think that there can be some very valid reasons for why people are, hating on a certain group of people after repeated bad experiences. And I mean, I'm going to take the nuance out of it just to say if you have your period of being like, I hate X number of people, go for it. Take critical thinking out of it for a minute because I think people need to have a moment of that. I just
Hmm.
make it a perpetuity. Like, I just don't think you want to be in that era for the rest of your days because, as you
Right.
said, that sort of denies you from the opportunity to actually still engage with people who could actually treat you really well and actually be a really good loving partner. I mean, my attitude with dating now is I treat it like an experiment. For me, it's actually really good for my brain because I'm like, okay, I've tried these certain individuals and I tried this method, that didn't work. And when I'm looking for like certain individuals now, I've sort of like accumulated so many things where I'm like, I'm getting much better at discerning what works well for me and what doesn't.
Yeah, I love that for you. And listen, I'm not immune to the whole like, after a bad breakup, I definitely years back was like, oh, I'm definitely done with men. I hate this. Like that's just a quick era. But I do hope that people still keep their, if that's what they really want. I just don't want them to be misaligned and say one thing, but deep down they really want that relationship, but they're, standing in this armor of like, no, I don't need it because I don't think that like opens the door either to any opportunities they need. They need to, be in alignment with what they really want and be okay if it's not happening. But yeah, discernment. I think I always, dating's kind of like collecting data more. It's more like you said, you're learning more stuff about like what works for you and what doesn't. I also feel like, when I think about the dating apps, it's an attraction. I think that they miss a big part of that. Like, and I know like people are like, well, FaceTime, right? FaceTime so you can see the energy and stuff like that. But And you can feel energy through FaceTiming and through the video sometimes. But I think people miss a lot of opportunities to align with people that they might connect with because they're not meeting in person because they're already making that judgment based off of like the picture or the FaceTime or the phone call. And I'm like, I do think it helps, yes, to kind of discern or to figure out if it's going to be like if it aligns with you and it's of enough interest to go out. But I think people do it so quickly that they miss the opportunity to actually go out, collect some data, learn a little bit more about themselves, and see if there's an energy spark, you know?
Oh, totally. And one thing I found too was after having had an experience where I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to get this again, I found it three more fucking times and it didn't end up, it's like it didn't end up going in a better, healthier direction. It was more of the same.
Yeah,
It was good for me because I was like, oh, this is what this is. The number
yeah,
of people who say to me things like, this is rare, it's ephemeral, I'm like, it's really not. Like if you want to have an experience like this again, just wait until you're back out there. You'll find it. Like if you
yeah, yeah.
want it, you will find it. And then you probably need to do some introspection and be like, why do I keep looking for this? But that's neither here nor there. I think that, you know, finding that spark again in someone it's a delightful thing. Like I mean, it really feels like, good, I'm capable of feeling this again. It means it can actually be really like relieving to be like, good, I'm not broken. I can actually enjoy this experience. Mutuals that we know, one person I'm thinking of in particular, she had a history of dating where she had, bad relationships, she had great ones, and she recently got out of one that was just dreadful a few years ago before meeting her current partner. And they met while she was on holiday in Italy. And, they
Wow.
built up their relationship slowly but surely. But one thing both of them had in common was they both had similar history in terms of dating. And they were both, I think, not cautious, but just, they paced themselves. And it was only
Hmm.
when she was like, okay, I'm ready to escalate and see if there's any, sexual chemistry here that she just said, you don't need to speak to me like an acquaintance. I'm very happy to escalate this and to see if there's actually some, sexual tension between us as well, too. And one thing led to another, and a few years later they're married and they're doing seemingly really well for each other now, which is fantastic.
Love
Um,
that.
and I think that that what I loved about their whole thing was there was that pace, there was the room to create sexual intimacy when it was appropriate, and they were both willing and open to loving again off the back of their experiences.
I love that. Yeah, I love that's one thing I love about bartending. I always find people who have stories like, especially lately, I've been running to people who are probably I would say 65 and older, and I'm like, oh, they seem like they've been married for 30 years, and I'm like, how'd you meet? And they're like, literally, we just started dating, and we've been dating for this long, and they're telling me, and it's so inspiring, but it's neat to see that it is. I find that a lot of them have shared experiences, but they also make a very good team where you can tell like it's a supportive connection, like they support one another. It's just a different era, when two people don't care and they want the same thing, and it's neat to see. But yeah, I've asked a lot of them like, how did you meet? They've reconnected, and I think they've just been open to the whole idea and not shut down or shut off. Yeah.
I completely agree with everything you've said. And I also think, too, that, it just goes to show that I know some of us may have a timeline, and I really think people in their own way need to grieve their own timeline because I think so
Hmm.
many people, I know I have these like timelines of by 28, I'll have achieved a job, by 30, have a
Hmm.
partner, by 35, kids, by this age, that age, I'll have all my ducks lined up in a row. And some people might have already done that prior to that, but I think the fallacy with that is it's just like, look, life doesn't magically work out that way. For some, if it does, congratulations, you won a lottery. But for the rest of us, it's not such a linear journey to those points. And
Hmm.
even achieving some of those things may not really be what your heart desires. And sometimes it still may be wonderful. But I just think that if you behold yourself to a timeline, you really, I think, screw yourself in the long run. But at the same time, if you had a timeline and you feel like a failure because you didn't achieve some of these milestones that you had for yourself, it's still okay to grieve that you're now maybe reaching 40 and you haven't had
Yeah.
children. It's okay to grieve and think maybe this is not actually meant for me. Maybe I'm actually meant for a different path. That's okay to grieve that. It doesn't mean you're a failure. It certainly doesn't mean your romantic relationships are over, It just means this is where you're at.
Oh yeah, I say burn the rule book, burn the time frame. And I also think it's really important that people stop, they really need to burn the idea of their ideal partner sometimes because I find that that's one of the main things blocking people from finding what they want. We expect our partner to end up to appear as a certain package. And sometimes that's not how that works. You know what I mean? Like it's people who are literally like right in front of you, you may not even know, that could be aligned for you. But typically, I don't know if you've frozen or not. Hold
I think
on.
I have frozen, yeah.
Anyways, but I find that people have an idea of what their partner is going to look like. And I think that is sometimes what blocks them from seeing what possibly could be the love of their life or an opportunity to explore.
Yes, and you've touched on something that I want to talk about, which is this idea of quote unquote the love of your life. I want to also just
Mhm.
gently say to people, also think of seasonality as being a huge feature in dating and relationships because I think if you get into this notion of this is the thing for the rest of my days, you actually miss the opportunity to realize, look, some of us aren't built forever and ever. Some of us are actually built
Mhm.
for seasons. And there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. Like sometimes you'll just go through this beautiful phase of love or learning or whatever it may be, and you reach the end and you go, okay, we're done. And
Yeah.
you're off on your merry way.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's accepting which reality is yours, and embracing that because I definitely believe in that. Because I mean, I'm like definitely at that stage where it's like, I didn't really think like I don't know. I feel like there's lots of loves. I think there's different seasons. I think there's different lessons to be learned. I think there's different things, and I think it's beautiful and all of that. And it would be great if, yeah, it'd be nice to have one person, but at the end of the day, I don't think if you are so committed to that ideal of what it's supposed to look like, again, you may miss everything in between. And I definitely don't want to be that person. So I think, yeah, burn the rule book, burn the time frame, burn the ideal, and stay open because a lot of times you don't even know until it's right in front of you.
And also, I think too, whilst we talk a lot in particularly in the therapy space about like find a secure partner, I think that too can be a bit of a fantasy. So it's kind of just like just get rid of that. Like no one's perfect, no one's showing up,
Yeah.
brilliantly all the time. I think it's better to just, embrace, finding someone who's, got their own unique set of challenges, but they're also willing and able to work on their own stuff without affecting you.
Oh yeah, I think at the end of the day, you just have to listen. It's like saying love is that choice, right? You got to choose who you commit to loving, and it's like find someone that really, is an asset and adds to your life and works for you and fits. And I think there's multiple people that can do that, right? Like depending on your priorities and your values and different things like that. But again, you like you said, people put such a high significance, a high value on that one person, the love of your life, or that one person that's going to be everything, and that's a lot to pour into and then have it end up in divorce in 10 years or 2 years or whatever.
And not to mention too that and I think this is a gender thing as well in particular, that it can be a trap, particularly I think for women to go through that experience because if you know if it's God forbid it's an abusive relationship or one where the financial assets aren't in a way that favors, in any way, shape, or form the woman,
Hmm.
then she's the one who ends up in a significantly worse off position as a consequence as well too. Now, of course, that can flip. And it's not to say that men don't have consequences for this experience as well too, particularly for the fact that a lot of men can be in abusive relationships with women, and of
Right.
course the over-reporting of male violence overshadows the violence that happens to men by female partners. I get that, but I think that some of these institutions we have, specifically marriage, look lovely on paper, but can have big consequences for people if they're not ready for the realities of it.
Oh, I agree completely, completely. Yeah. I think you definitely got to know what you're doing. I think you got to be informed. It's not going to be all peaches and cream. And so many people miss it because, there is, women and men who want just the wedding, the title, these things, and I think it's really important to know exactly what that means and what that, what it looks like. Because, people have different ideas of what things look like. I was just talking to somebody, and they were saying, oh yeah, they were talking about someone they had met, and they go to church. That and I said, do they go to church every Sunday? Because this person goes to church, and wants a partner who's going to go to church and do all these things with them. And I said, do they go to church? And they don't go to church every week, but they do go to church. And I said, so, well, she has her faith, and the question becomes, it's not that she has her faith, but what does that look like for you two? He thought it was just a, box checked because she has her faith and she, goes to church, but Maybe she's not that person that wants to go to church with you every week, or maybe she does want to go every week with a partner. But aside from it being church, it's just one of those things again where those values that we say, oh yeah, they're the same as me. It can look different. So make sure you're digging in and asking multiple questions because people will check those boxes quick, like qualifiers, but it looks completely different and then have an argument about it later. And it's like, well, you said you were financially stable. Well, financially stable may look different to you versus them, or you said you like this. And it was like, no, I said, do you know what I mean? People aren't asking enough questions. They're not doing enough of the work to be able to find that, and figure that out.
Or they pre-qualify too early and think, well, just because that person said that, it must mean everything's hunky-dory and it's fine. And it's like, we're up for the
Freezing
races,
on
we're all
me.
good. It's like, when people are out dating, I think they can have this misassumption
I
where
don't
it's,
know if you can hear me, Kim, but you're frozen
oh, am I
on my
frozen?
end.
Oh, I think we're better now.
Okay, yep, gotcha.
Yeah, like what I was saying was, I think people also pre-qualify too early. They hear what they want to hear. They hear, oh, I value honesty too.
Yes.
I also don't believe in bad communication. I would never go someone and all this stuff. It's like, listen, oh, one of the big ones. God forbid, I hope people learn not to do this anymore. Um, you've gone through a bad experience and you're out dating someone new and you tell them, my last ex ghosted me and I never want to go through that experience again. And in saying that, you're almost trying to hope that by saying that to the next person, they won't do it to you as well. It's almost like, if I say this, hopefully they'll get the message that that's something that would really affect me. They could still do it and often would. Like if they've got their own issues, don't think for a minute that just because you've put your heart out on your sleeve in a very particular way, that they have any obligation to not hurt you because they can. And it's not to say they
Right.
deserve to be hurt, but I think that I've seen so many people be like, I told my partner not to do this to me and they still did it to me anyways. It's like, you know, that person isn't under your control. Yes, it's terrible that this has happened. Yes, he didn't deserve this.
Yeah.
But did you think that, those early day conversations would necessarily translate into a perfect partner? No, because that's not how this works.
Yeah. I mean, and there's plenty of memes that, excuse me, there's plenty of memes that support that. You know, the meme where it's like, well, they did exactly what the last person
Yes.
did, and they said they'd never do it. And I'm like, right, because just because someone else did it doesn't mean they can't do it. And because you've had that conversation, yeah, it doesn't work like that. And maybe their intentions were never to do that in the beginning. But once they got in depth and in longer in the relationship, they realized that, you know what, they are gonna do it. So it's like, people have good intentions a lot of times in the beginning, but as the relationship grows and, experiences happen, people change their minds. People act like you can't change your mind during these things. And it's like having experiences can shift your opinion, your perspective, or your idea anytime.
And that's not always down to attachment. Like I've had changes
Hmm.
with partners as well too, where it hasn't been sudden, but it's been gradual. And I've, spelt it out every step of the way as it was happening, being like, didn't like this, didn't like that, would appreciate if you don't do that. It erodes your interest. You just get to a point where you're like, okay, what I thought in this is not what I thought it would be. I got a mate, he's
Yeah.
told me he's dated plenty of women where and this is his thing to work on, he's dove in headfirst being like, the potential is here. And then later realized, no, the potential is very much not here. And he's awkwardly backed away. And again, something for him to work on. There are so many like mental processes that are going on for people. And also a big thing too, and I'm using this word broadly, I'm not using it exclusively in a neurodivergent context, but frankly, people mask in dating all the freaking time, meaning that they show up with what they think is socially acceptable much of the
Yeah.
time, and that's lovely. They show up with their best, version of themselves, and we all do it to a degree. But at the end of the day, showing up in the initial encounters of dating doesn't necessarily translate to this is how they're going to be for the rest of your days. Now, does that mean you need to wait till month 3 necessarily to back away if you spot trouble? No. And that's not being hyper vigilant. Sometimes you'll quickly pick up on certain traits where you're like, I know this constellation. I don't need to confirm if it's Orion or one of the other astrological things. The point simply is that, you get quicker and more discerning. And at the same time, you also learn to realize the first early encounters don't really mean all that much.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Definitely. Yeah, I think people hold, I mean, we all say we want that person who showed up in the beginning to be the person who ends up being there 2 years in, 5 years in, but people grow, people change. And like you said, it's like going to a job interview. We're going to be on our best behavior, our best representation. And then when we get hired and you finally get to know us, you start to see other things that occur. So it's one of those things you just have to know if it's you're compatible. And when you find, you know what it is I think people see this along the way, but then it's, oh, we've already been together 2 years now, or maybe it's the fear of like, I won't find anybody else. So it's that when they realize that when that good girl person comes out or that good guy comes out and they don't want to speak up, they don't want to rock the boat, they don't want to do this. And I think that's where sacrifices begin to get, we're not moving quick enough. Not that you have to cut the cord quickly or, have your strong cutoff game, but you do need to know how to say, you know what, like this isn't really a line. I'm going to have the conversation. If I'm not heard that first time, not to say you can't have it again, but the fact is people who typically want to work on this together, two individuals are willing to do whatever it takes to make it work. And if they're not, then you have to be able to quickly move and exit. And people, I think that's what happens. Toxicity happens and you stay instead of making the decision that something has to shift now. And then you have all that time of toxicity just repeating and occurring. And it's like people need to be more powerful in how they move when those things occur, and not base it off of excuses of why they belong together.
You completely agree. And can I add too, they also need to do it quicker with each time it happens because, as my supervisor said to me, and she was absolutely right, the longer you let this lapse, the worse it will get. And it makes it even more
Mhm.
messy when you ultimately break up as well too. Better to know the signs earlier and go done than to let it
Yeah.
drag out where it becomes a problem. And I agree with you. Like I think that if you keep beholding yourself to this image and this idea of but we were so good in the beginning. I want to get back to that. Yes, inner child, I get that. But at the same time, it's my hope that as, people mature, particularly in their realm of dating, they realize that was a side of who they were.
Hmm.
You've gone too deep with this person where they've now shown you another side of who they are. The cat's out of the bag and it's not going back in.
Yeah, and that's the time when we address it or we figure out if that's going to work for you or if this obviously it is. It's another layer that you've gotten to, exposed to. And at that time you got to decide again, it goes back to like that, like especially for women, good girl, we're gonna put their needs in front of ours. We're gonna like, swipe it underneath the rug. It's gonna, because we see all the other good stuff. But I don't think, and maybe when I say people stay, I was gonna say, lack thereof. But it's like, I've been there. I've been that person. I could have left year two and I stayed three more, like there's all these things, but I think moving forward, so you don't repeat the cycle, you've got to make quicker moves. You've got to put your foot down. That's why boundaries are so important. That's why standards are so important. We got to raise our standards. We got to set our boundaries. That's what happened. Boundaries are broken, and then you address them, but there's no consequence. There's no behavior change. Talking about boundaries and what they were aren't going to be helpful. It's like when I have friends who went on dates and were like first dates and were like, "Well, I told them right off the bat, like I don't tolerate this A, B, C, and D." It doesn't matter what you say. You could just be quiet and embody all of that. And when it happens, you're done. You don't need to explain to people. You move accordingly. Usually when you tell all those things, men have the blueprint or people have the blueprint to go, oh, I can tell she's been hurt. I'll probably be able to manipulate her. I'll probably be able to do these things. So I don't think you necessarily always have to speak them out loud. I think you just need to enforce them.
Completely agree. I think the speaking ultimately doesn't really do much. I think the consequences matter more than just the articulation
Hmm.
of them. Too many people, frankly, are way too good at speaking up for their boundaries, but are not so strong at enforcing their boundaries at
Oh
all.
yeah.
And I think speaking to that stereotype, well, I don't want to call it a stereotype because it's more than that. The conditioning and the way I think the concept of nice girls very radically different to the concept of nice guys.
Oh yeah.
I think for nice girls, there's so many things going into that as well that are layered with not just conditioning but trauma as well. And I think
Hmm.
if we just stay with that for a minute, I think particularly for a lot of women, you know, some phrases that I think are very appropriate for this are decentering men in the context of straight women, also getting to
Hmm.
a point where they're able to speak up for themselves without feeling too much, where they're not fawning and feeling like, oh, I need to, save the connection over my own well-being as well. And also we haven't touched on today, but I mean, I think when people, I think particularly for women, you know, if they, especially if they have like chronic health related challenges that have been contributed by stressful relationships, you just don't put up with the same crap as you would before because you're like, my health's on the line. I can't afford to have a partner who doesn't respect my well-being.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the hope for most, and it does work that way. But there are a population of women who, because of that, they're still repeating cycles, or they're not leaving sooner, or they're repeating those same relationships because their health is like that. And I think those are ones who have been conditioned since childhood, through society, through their adult life, and it's not something they're very familiar with. Because I have worked with a few clients, and I have one now specifically that does have health challenges. Um, even though her voice, and we've talked about it, and she's like, I can't put up with this. This is my health. They've just led a life of being passive, of not standing up for themselves. And it started in childhood, then it went into relationships, then another toxic relationship. So I do find it's hard for them. They say one thing, but it's hard for them to actually get comfortable implementing what that looks like after the fact, you know?
Completely agree. I completely agree, Tawny. I think that you know, it's a I think in and of itself it's a real skill to learn how to
Mhm.
stand up for yourself. And I think that I can understand some of the fear, particularly straight women have around doing that. And I also think too, what adds to that too is the violence that men have done to women. And I'm saying this,
Mhm.
from all the research I've done into this too, because, you know, the fear that women, I think, rightfully have around, being on the streets, being around men, and the history of violence that's been perpetrated against, women by men, I think really show that vigilance and almost that, the nice girl has been essentially a bit of survival against a lot of that sort of stuff as well too. And I know there's other layers to it as well. And I know I'm not talking specifically about, the male experience, and that's not my focus here right now. But just focusing on this, I do think that, it's a privilege and it's very hard to just be able to, say what you want, do what you want, and to ask for what you want, and also to enforce what you want when you've had all this historical stuff going against you.
Yeah, and I think that's the time when you realize you need support, right? You need you want a new level, a new standard for yourself, and that's when you have to have support. And there's got to be a level of humility with it, because the fact is it's okay to need that support. When it's like going to the gym, and we just talked about me, getting a personal trainer and going to the gym. I can do all those things. I can read it. I know all the information, but I know that growth requires a new level for me, and it's a new level of support that I need. So I think when you realize that, I think that's why there are those women who really do lean into like the coaching and the, therapy and so forth, because they want to, have that support and accountability. And I think you have to have it in order to be able to implement those skill sets that you've never been used to having. You can't practice that once a week. That has to be something that you are, working on daily with somebody. Not to say we're coaching every day, but the thing is you have things where you can implement, and you have structure, and you can start to, apply those skill sets in your own life so that it can become practice and become something natural for you.
Completely agree. And I mean, it's like learning a whole new way of life. I mean, it's
Yeah.
liberating, but at the same time, it's full on. So yeah, I completely agree. And I think, even though I think there's rightfully some criticism towards dating coaches because of the oversimplicity of what's communicated much of the time, there's still some great people out there and professionals who, step into this space to talk about this sort of stuff. And I think this is again where the wisdom lies in figuring out who those kinds of people are and actually how
Hmm.
to find those people. Because the ones that I think are invested in the long term are the ones who are also speaking about openly about the realities of this as well too. Like, I mean, they're not giving you the 5 texts on how to get your ex back or the 10 ways to communicate with someone who's
Yeah.
got attachment issues. It's just like, here's the reality. Do you want, what kind of relationship do you want? And also, how do we get you to just stop involving yourself with people who just don't have what you're looking for?
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's why it's important. That's why, at the end of the day, you got to find someone you align with, right? It's not just what they're teaching you, and that's why lots of our posts are never going to really like. We can take it all in, and we share a lot of educational stuff and informational stuff, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to, that truth serum and who's delivering it and sharing that with you, and how do you relate to them? So,
Yes, truth serum is bang on accurate. I think a lot of people are a bit, they're not ready for that. I mean, I was just thinking about it just then. There are so many people too who preach strategies like, black cat, golden retriever, how to get a girl by, being more masculine and in your polarity and stuff like this. But a lot of those techniques, I think, it's pretty similar, I think, to me, to the unethical advice we often see in the fitness industry, which is eat less, move more, when it's like it's
mhm.
incredibly nuanced and everyone's physiology is quite different. And when you've kind of gone, above and beyond and you've seen, the other side of things, you know, it's just getting the thing doesn't mean it's sustainable. And that's, I think, what you and I are after. We're not just here to, get a partner. We're here to actually make a loving relationship work out of this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed that. Yeah, for sure. I mean, social media has been helpful, obviously, but it definitely has its downside to it, right? And I think anytime you lean into social media, you're going to find whatever narrative you're looking to find to support you. And that's where it can go like spiraling out of control, right? Because you could go, oh, I'm done dating. Now everything you're reading is about being done dating. Or now you want to level up your dating, or you want to, take on the black cat phenomenon and be this woman. But not everything applies, and not everything you read is going to apply to you. I mean, I think it's just information, right? It's kind of like goes back to dating. It's data, it's collection, collect all that data, see where it fits for you, and see what you can take away from it. But ultimately, I think be honest with what you want and learn what kind of partner can provide that, so you don't waste your time on a lot of people like find people they like knowing that partner doesn't align with they can never provide you with what you want, so you're going to constantly be unfulfilled, and then they're going to feel like you're never, it's never enough and so forth. um I think you just have to own what it is that you want and be okay with that.
I completely agree with everything you've said. And I also think, too, that one last thing I'll say before we round out is I think it's really important that people also look beyond the image of a person when they're dating someone as well, too, because I think it's very easy to get hooked on the idea of a person rather
Hmm.
than the reality of a person. And I think this also applies to social media advice. You can listen to people who have, all these amazing ideas for how to show up, but they themselves may not be the right people to be listening to as well, too, because they've got their own set of issues as well. And they're also not disclosing what their relationship looks like. Someone can be showing up with like the most amazing design of a relationship, but you don't know what they're like behind the scenes. And I mean, not to get all Jungian on people, but I mean, I got to tell you, the people who need to show up that hard on social media to show the way their relationship is are probably hiding a lot of their own stuff that you don't see that's affecting them day to day.
Oh yeah, because at the end of the day, not we know this, not everything's perfect. It's not going to be perfect and suns and beaches every day. So if they're not showing the other side to it, then it's questionable. Yeah, you definitely want, like, when it comes to this, it's trust, truth, and transparency. I think, it's someone that is going to be honest with you about it from every angle.
Yeah, yeah. And I tend to be skeptical of online relationships that are preaching advice because I think that, it's I think it's one thing. Especially in the attachment space. I know we've talked about this too, but I think it's dangerous to give false hope to people in certain dynamics because,
Mhm.
as you beautifully said once, you can be short of, just strangling yourself to make something work when it's not going to.
Yeah, hope is, I don't want to say it that way. I'm being more mindful of my words. Hope is, yeah, they give so much hope, and hope is, it's so hard not to say what I want to say right now. There's a word I'm trying to avoid, and I've just said I'm not going to say it because, it has power to it. So let me rethink how to say that. Yes, hope. It will keep you strong um, strung out and strung along for longer than you'd like, when the reality is, if you don't, we talked about this before, if you're still holding on to hope, you're not quite healing yet, right? You can't, it's almost like when you say you can't worry and pray at the same time. You can't kind of like be hoping and healing at the same time is kind of how I feel. I mean, there's a duality to it, yes, but if you're hanging on to a little piece of hope, how can you keep moving forward on your healing journey? Because you still have a little bit of hope. Yes, you're learning things and all this, but again, it keeps you in that emotional quicksand where you're like, okay, and then you're back and forth and trying to escape it. It's not healthy.
No, it's not. And it's, yeah, everything you said, I completely agree with. I mean, it's something that people need to come to on their own terms. But, anyways, rounding out, it was so good chatting to you about this. This was fun.
Yeah.
And I know that today was more of a collection of points regarding dating, and I'm sure we'll get into something deeper in the future as well. But it was lovely to go beyond what we normally talk about.
Yeah, I love it. I love that. Yeah, because I think there's a lot to offer. I think there's a lot to be said. I mean, the dating spectrum, the relationship spectrum, all of that. There's so many dynamics. There's so many diverse views. I think there's just at the end of the day, listen, life looks a lot different. I don't think we need to carry a book around that says we have to be married, we have to do it this way, we have to have it by this time frame. I think there's the rules are out the door nowadays, and I think there's so many diverse dynamics that I think you just have to do what feels comfortable for you, so that you don't have to answer to anybody else because at the end of the day, nobody cares. Nobody really cares.
No, nobody really cares. And also, we're all still figuring this stuff out. It's a confusing mess. And there's a lot of unlearning to do and a lot of relearning to do, and just trusting yourself and just trusting what you see in front of you.
Yeah.
Because, oh God, like it's, yeah, find your own truth. I think that's the moral of the story.
Yeah, find your own truth. Find what works for you. Stop listening to the outside distractions and people and do what works for you. But in the same moment when you're doing it for you, make sure you trust yourself, and if you're not trusting yourself, we've got to go back before we start doing whatever we want, because to give that advice, listen, we're saying, yep, do what you want, do what aligns with you. And there's people that just aren't at their healthiest and they're going to make some choices based off that, like, well, I'm going to do what I want to do, and then it's not going to, pan out for them. So make sure you trust yourself first and you're in a healthy space, and then, proceed to do what you like.
100%. Go play, go
Yeah.
experiment. All right, guys, thank you very much for joining us for this episode. This was a lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll do more of
Yeah.
this sort of deep dives into things in the future. And again, Tawny, thank you for joining us. For people who want to
Yeah.
potentially connect with you, where can they find you?
I hope I'm guessing you're gonna connect a link here, right? Correct? Put a link
Yeah,
for us.
we'll put a link in for you specifically.
Yeah, put a link in for myself. You can find me on social media. You can find me on Ken's team, any of those.
Amazing. Well, guys, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you again soon.